Christianity has been tormenting their flocks of misguided sheep with the boogeyman of eternal torment in hell for a millennia. Hell hangs over the consciousness of the evangelical Christian like a medieval torture chamber, ready to inflict pain onto them. The big difference between hell and the torture chamber, however, is that hell is eternal, meaning the pain will never end. Endless torture for the unfortunate soul who ends up there. So how can a God who is love do such a thing exactly? The pagan lie of never-ending torment in hell has generated unimaginable wealth for the church, all at the people's expense. But is it actually true? Will God actually burn most of his own creation endlessly in hellfire? No. It's a demonic lie. Satan uses the name of Christ himself to inflict terror onto humanity, using the lie of eternal torment, which mocks God and defames him, painting God out to be an evil, sadistic tyrant. You'll often hear hellfire preachers quote these verses as absolute proof of hell, not realizing that hell is a mistranslation, a pagan teaching plastered over the original text and its meaning. The teaching of eternal torment isn't scriptural. A better translation of those three verses would be the unseen instead of hell. The unseen, or Hades in the Greek, means the grave, the unperceived. It's a place of the unseen, it's a place where the dead go to after they die. It's not a place of eternal torment for unbelievers. There are no flames in Hades, no sinners screaming out in agony, and there's no red devils that are torturing people there. The dead are not conscious there either. Death is a state of non-existence. You are not conscious when you are dead. You simply don't exist. When you die, you cease to exist. You do not exist. As we see in these two verses from Ecclesiastes, there is no devising or doing or knowledge when you are dead. The dead know nothing whatsoever because you don't exist. They go to the unseen, or Hades, or Shaul in Hebrew. The unseen, which is the wording of the concordant translation that I'm using, comes from the two words Hades and Shaul. In the Old Testament, the Hebrew word is Shaul, which means the tomb, the unknown. It does not mean hell, it is the grave. And in the New Testament, the Greek word used, which is the same thing as Shaul, is Hades, meaning the grave, the unperceived. And it's this word Hades which is commonly misunderstood as hell. Common translations like the KJV plaster hell over Hades. Neither of these words mean hell, neither Hades or Sheol. They've been wrongly translated as hell by Christianity, so they can push their satanic doctrine of eternal torment onto people. Let's compare Revelation chapter 20 verses 13 to 14 with the KJV and the Concordant Literal Translation, the one that I'm using. You'll see the poorly translated word hell in the KJV and the accurate translation of Hades being the unseen in the Concordant. So first we'll read from the Concordant. Revelation chapter 20 verses 13 to 14. And the sea gives up the dead in it, and death and the unseen give up the dead in them, and they were condemned, each in accord with their acts. And death and the unseen were cast into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. The word Hades is in the original Greek, which means the grave. It's not an eternal torture chamber. That's a man-made concept. The Concordant does a great job of translating it as the unseen versus the inaccurate translation of hell in the KJV. Also, a bit of context for these verses. These verses take place at the Great White Throne Judgment, after Israel's 1,000-year reign with Christ here on the earth has ended. The people and celestial beings that are being judged will be judged according to their acts and not their sins, because Christ's death has already done away with all sin. Those not found in the scroll of life will be cast into the lake of fire, which is not hell, it's the second death. Those that are found written in the scroll of life will participate in the new heavens and the new earth, or the fifth eon. Those that go to the lake of fire will be reconciled back to God at the consummation, when all things are headed up in the Christ, and then death, the last enemy, is abolished. Here's some more examples of the Greek word Hades, translated the unseen in the Concordant, being plastered with hell in poor translations like the KJV, which use the word hell. Matthew 11:23, and you, Capernaum, not to heaven shall you be exalted, to the unseen shall you subside. For if the powerful deeds which are occurring in you had occurred in Sodom, it might remain unto today. So Capernaum was consigned to the unseen, to Hades, not to hell like it says in the KJV. There's nothing left of it because it's in the grave. It no longer exists. Hades means the grave, and when someone or something is in the grave, they no longer exist. If you don't exist anymore, you can't be tortured in hell. That seems pretty logical, right? Here's some more verses with the Greek word Hades that's wrongly translated as hell in the KJV and in other Bibles. Revelation chapter 6 verse 8. And I perceived, and lo, a greenish horse, and the name of him who was sitting upon it is Death. And the unseen followed him, and jurisdiction was given them over the fourth of the earth, to kill with the blade, and with famine, and with death, and by the wild beasts of the earth. So what follows after death? It's Hades, the unseen. You go to a place that is not seen, hence the wording unseen. You no longer exist. You go to the grave. What doesn't happen after you die is you ending up in a place of hell, an eternal torture chamber forever. Revelation chapter 1 verse 18. And the living one, and I became dead, and lo, living am I for the eons of the eons. Amen. And I have the keys of death and of the unseen. According to the KJV translation of this verse, Christ has the keys of hell, meaning he can put an end to the suffering of billions of people that are being tortured forever in hell forever, if he wanted. Yet he doesn't, because why exactly? Is this the same Son of God who said to his disciples to love your enemies? Do you see how a bad translation can turn God and his Son into tyrannical psychopaths? In reality, Christ has the keys of Hades, the unseen, as it says in the Concordant, which isn't a place of eternal torment, it's the grave where all the dead people are. And the dead people are not conscious because they no longer exist. When you die, you're just ceased to exist, you're just erased from creation. Now let's go into the verses with the Hebrew word Shaul. And Shaul is the Hebrew equivalent of Hades. It's the unseen, the unknown, the tomb. You'd think that if hell were real, these verses that I'm about to show you would have been a great opportunity as a warning to people. Why wouldn't God warn people back then about hell? Doesn't that seem a little strange to you? He didn't even warn Adam and Eve of hell. You know why? Because hell is a man-made doctrine. These verses speak of the grave. In the Hebrew it's Shaul, in the Greek it's Hades. It's the unseen. Let's go into this verse, Isaiah chapter 14 verse 11. Your pomp is brought down to the unseen, the clamour of your decadence. Under you the maggot shall birth, and the worm become your cover. The worm becomes a cover for someone when they are dead, when their body is decaying. This verse clearly links Shaul or Sheol, the unseen, with being dead. Isaiah chapter 14 verse 15. Nevertheless, to the unseen shall you be brought down, to the remote parts of the crypt. The unseen is something you are brought down to. You are brought down to the crypt in this verse, clearly painting a picture of the grave. Proverbs chapter 1 verse 12. Like the unseen, we shall swallow them up alive and robust, like those descending to a crypt. Once again, this verse is saying the unseen is a place where the dead go, as in when you die you go down to the unseen or Shaul. And remember, death is a state of non-existence. It's not like you're in another dimension. Okay, one last verse and then we'll move on. Ezekiel chapter 31 verse 17. They also will descend with it to the unseen, to those slain by the sword and its armed force. They will dwell in its shade in the midst of the nations. Those slain by weapons like swords descend into Shaul, the unseen. They don't end up in a mythical hell torture chamber because they're dead. Hades is the Greek equivalent of the Hebrew word Shaul. They both mean the grave. It's where the dead go to after they die. Christianity has taken the verses with Hades and they've just slapped hell onto it, not understanding that hell is a pagan concept and it's not even in the scriptures. Hades means exactly what Sheol means or Shaul means. It's the grave. It's death. It's where you go to after you die, which is a state of non-existence. Hades and Shaul are not hell. They are the unseen, the grave, the tomb. It's the place where the dead go to, which isn't a place where you can walk around as if you were conscious. The dead don't exist. They have been erased from creation itself. They will be resurrected and judged at the great white throne judgment. And they won't be judged for their sins, they will be judged according to their acts. And depending on their acts, they will go to the lake of fire, which is the second death, or they will go into the fifth age or eon, onto the new heavens and the new earth. That judgment does not involve hellfire. Those that don't enter into the fifth age or eon will go to the lake of fire, which is the second death. The lake of fire has not got anything to do with this man-made doctrine known as hell. Hell isn't scriptural. Hades and Shaul are not hell. They are the unseen.